Okay, so now let's define a function that will take hours, minutes, and seconds as data, and then it will return you the total seconds elapsed for that given duration. Okay, so let's define a function. So let's take the let's define the function after main function. Okay, so here to define the function, we should know that what will be the return type of the function. So function will return an integer or a float or a double or a char or a string, or it will return void, right? So we should basically have the return type of the function. So what we are going to do inside the function, based on that, we should know that what will be the return type, right? So in this example, the function will take the hours, let's say we provide that in terms of integers, then minutes, again integer, let's say, then seconds, let's say again integers. So if we pass basically hours, minutes, and seconds as integers, so the total seconds that we will basically compute based on the hours, minutes, and seconds, so that will also be an integer, right? So in this case, let's say it's integer, right? So that's a return type value, return type basically, okay? And then here, the function name, let's say we call it like seconds, okay? And here, so this function will take three parameters. So first parameter, let's say hours, okay? Second, let's say, you can keep it h, for example. Second, let's say m, which is again integer. And third, let's say s, right? So here you see that this is called the function name, and this is called basically the return type. And these are how many parameters? Three parameters or data items which are passed to this function, right? And then here, what we will do basically, we can declare total, right? And then we can define this total as like, if you multiply hours with 60, it will give you minutes. And then again, if you multiply it with 60, it will give you seconds, right? And then if you multiply minutes with 60, it will give you basically seconds and then seconds, right? So here, now you have this total, and then it basically, you have to return this total. So yeah, so we have to do here three things. We have to declare a variable total, and then we have to compute the value of total, and then we are returning this total to the caller, right? Now here, how I can use this inside main function, right? So here inside main function, let's say I declare variable hours, minutes, seconds, okay? And then I ask user enter hours, then user, then I will ask user to enter minutes, then I will ask user to enter seconds, right? And then let's say we have another variable, let's say total seconds, right? And then here we will basically use total seconds, and how we will assign the value into this total seconds. So I will call the function seconds, okay? So here I would say we have seconds function name. So let's say this variable, instead of seconds, let's say put sex. So let's say put let's keep it seconds, okay? And then it's let's say compute seconds. Okay, let's name this function name compute seconds, okay? So okay, so now here what we are doing, basically we are calling this compute seconds, right? And then this compute seconds, we have to pass three items. One is for hours, then for minutes, and then for seconds, right? Okay. So now here we have this, right? So here you see that we have in main function. So whatever we are doing in main function, right? We use variable declaration, we use C in, C out, and then arithmetic statements, right? Same thing we do when we define our own function, right? You see here, right? The only difference that you can see that here, the function that you define, the parameters that you are passing, the data that you are passing, you can use them inside the function, right? So that's the difference that you see in your user-defined function, right? Okay, so here in compute second, so you have defined this compute second, right? So the R's value that you have, right? So that will be copied to this H value, and the minutes value that you will get from the user, that will be copied to this M, and the seconds value that you will get from the user, that will be copied to S, basically, right? So here, then basically you have this, right? So whatever H value that you got from R's, so that will be multiplied with 60 times 60. Whatever basically M value that you get from minutes, that will be multiplied with 60, and so on, right? So let's run this program. So you will get some issue when we run this program, right? So let's see that what issue we are getting, okay? So you get some error. So let's check this error. What is that error? So here you see that compute second identifier not found, right? So you see that we have compute seconds here, but the compilation says that the compute seconds identifier not found. Why it happened? Because we have defined compute seconds after main function. So we have to put the prototype of that function. We write in compute seconds, right? And then it will take 3 integers, right? So now if you run this program, it should not give you any error, okay? If I run this program, it should not give you any error, right? So let's say I put 3 hours, 5 minutes, and let's say 5 seconds. So it is not displaying anything because I have not displayed the total seconds. So let's say we can display the total seconds. And then let's say add. Okay. So here, if I compile now and run it, now if I put, let's say 2 hours, which will be basically 60, like 120 minutes, and basically 120 minutes time 60 seconds, 70, 200 seconds, right? Then let's say you have 30 minutes equivalent to 1800 seconds, right? And then you have, let's say 10 seconds, right? So then you will have total 9010 seconds, right? So that's basically the computation. So here what we did basically, right? We define a function which is called compute second. So how do we define that? We have to provide a return type, because total that we are returning here, it's an integer. So that's why we keep the return type int, right? And then we have basically the function name and how many data items this function takes. So we have 3 data items this function takes, right? So inside the function, we have defined a variable, local variable total, and total is equal to this formula, right? And then we are returning total. Once we define this function, right, then we declare the prototype of this function, which is here, which is the signature of the function, which is called function prototype, right? And then we can use this function here, just like sqrt or pow function that you have used earlier. So here we have used basically compute seconds, right? Okay. So that's very simple, right? So you can define your own functions.